this moment in time is the worst AI is ever going to be. Meaning, you expect that, you think about that, this right now is the worst AI is going to be. It's only going to get better, right?
Exactly. And it's already come so far,
So far, yeah.
right? And we were talking about this last week as well. Like, I think Mustafa Suleiman recently said in 12 to 18 months, most of our functions are going to be automated.
Welcome to Everyday Data, where we examine currently trending topics in data analytics and AI and how they show up in our everyday lives. We're your hosts, Patricia and Zach, MSB AI grads from NYU and data and pop culture enthusiasts. And today on the show, on the podcast, welcome back. We are talking about the next generation of coding, of agents, of AI, and where the whole AI movement is going and how it relates to everyday work, everyday coding, and not just coding. So we're going to talk about vibe coding, but we're also going to talk about co-working and this new era of living and working with AI. But first, we are going to share our news of the week. So Patricia, I'm going to pass it back to you. What is on your radar this week?
Okay, so I feel like Claude is just everyone's talking about Claude this week. I know you're going to as well. But my story is really interesting. So apparently this week a hacker used Claude to try and carry out an attack on Mexican government agencies. And we were kind of talking about this last week about just the power of bad actors to take AI and use it for evil. And here we go. This literally happened this past week. This hacker basically asked this bot to find vulnerabilities in the government's networks and to write scripts to exploit them. And he was specifically targeting tax records and voter records, which is very scary. And I mean, Anthropic, like they shut it down pretty quickly. They figured out what was happening, and the Mexican government is doing a bit of an investigation into how this breach happened. But this hacker was able to basically just bypass Claude's like safety checks to not do evil, but I think what he did is just frame the prompts as like technical requirements. And so
Yeah.
he's basically scammed Claude into helping him hack a government. So scary things are happening in the world. It's important to stay abreast of it. I know that you also have a government related Claude story, so I'll let
Yeah.
you also share yours.
Yeah, it's exactly like you just mentioned. It's exactly what we were talking about last week. So if you didn't watch our last episode, we talked about the book, The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleiman. And just to recap, what Patricia was referring to was the book talks about AI, the coming wave, but he also goes into the dangers. He frames it more on the synthetic biology side and how AI has led to great discoveries in biology, but it could conversely be used as a weapon to make a virus instead of an antibody. And yeah, your article about this government and what I'm going to talk about, which we talked about a little bit, but it's a more US centric story, but it is definitely a worldwide story just because the US outsized tech market. And that is the deal with the Department of Defense that Claude's maker, Anthropic, refused to sign. So they refused to sign an agreement that the US government and US military specifically could use Claude for activities such as spying on citizens or used in military operations. And I don't think the full details, of course, were made public, but they meaning the government and Anthropic, couldn't come to an agreement on the terms of use, and this led to President Trump, the U.S. president, blacklisting Anthropic's Claude from government work and putting him on this national security list was hugely a financial disaster for most companies. Means you can't be a contractor can't use Claude. No one in the government can use Claude, which again, for most companies that are government contractors would be like a death sentence. But why it's in the news is because this weekend when that came out, it led to an increase of people signing up for Claude this week, and Claude to number one on the App Store. It led to a large number of people uninstalling OpenAI because OpenAI did sign an agreement with the U.S. government. And yeah, just for the reasons in your article as well, it is the people upset about what are the limits of these AI technologies and the fact that they can be used for questionable and nefarious purposes. Would you want your AI model attached to, like an unauthorized drone strike where an AI made a decision? And that's definitely a moral gray area of when we get to that level of autonomy for these AI models. And what we're going to talk about today, AI agents and how we let AI run unsupervised now is the new wave that we're talking about. So I'll
Yeah.
kick that back to you using that as a story setup. What are we talking about this week?
So today we're going to be talking about vibe coding. So we're going to start off with vibe coding, and then I think we want to see how the conversation goes because we also wanted to talk about a little bit about the future of work. Because I think when you think of vibe coding, and I mean, hopefully everyone knows what vibe coding is. It's not a new topic, but I'll give a little bit of a background into it too. But when you think about vibe coding, it's really changing the way that we work, not only with software, not only with AI, but also with each other. And just like, I think vibe coding just starts a larger conversation around the concept of working with AI. And
Mhm.
so we'll touch on all of this a little bit as we go through our conversation today. But just as a bit of a primer for anyone who's maybe a little new to data analytics, still kind of wanting to learn about topics and see how they impact their lives, vibe coding, it's not a new topic at all. It's been around for a year. Basically, a year ago, Andrej Karpathy, I hope I said that name right, who's one of the co-founders of OpenAI, tweeted that there's a new kind of coding in town and he called it vibe coding. And basically, this is where developers, and not only developers, honestly, regular people too, can rely on AI agents and use natural language conversations to generate apps, features, scripts. So basically, using AI to do all of your coding for you, where previously you probably would developers would just sit and write lines and lines of code for hours, or you would outsource your development to a team in India, right? Like you're basically, your AI agents can just be coding your features, your software, all of that for you, and really you're basically just reviewing the code, or you're having someone review the code. So for example, there's actually a tool, there's many tools, I'm just going to call out one example, but there's one that's called Replit, and it offers AI agents that can create and deploy apps for you just based on natural prompts. So imagine you just like fire up Replit and you just in a chat bot say, "Hey, can you create an app for me where people can log their daily moods?" And you don't need any experience with coding, and you've basically created an app that you can, and this is obviously very simple example, but you've created an app all by yourself without needing to do any coding, which I think is very interesting. And let's talk about it today. Let's talk about how vibe coding is changing the way that we work, why it's important to even understand what vibe coding is and where it's going, and what are our predictions for the future. So, Zach, off to you. What are your thoughts on vibe coding? It's been a year since we've really been talking about it. So, let me know your initial thoughts on vibe coding.
Yeah. Vibe coding, I think it's interesting because, as you mentioned, it's been a year and it's changed so much. And I think it's important to talk about it in frame vibe coding with those advancements in just 1 year, because a year ago we almost couldn't imagine where we are now, especially with vibe coding. So to put this in context and use some concrete examples, this vibe coding really came about as the context window grew in AI, our commercial LLMs. So the context window, as simply, is how much information the AI large language model is able to remember. It's basically its memory. So if you remember, like maybe 2 years ago when we were in school at NYU, the prompts that you could do were super short. So like when I was coding things, yeah, you could only ask AI to fix one portion of your code because you couldn't feed it a whole code base. It was out of memory. Your context window was too small at that time. We didn't have the techniques in the LLMs to process a large prompt. So yeah, back then vibe coding was you had to know what your software was already doing. You had to know the architecture. You had to know most of the file, like doing your imports and doing this. You could do it in small chunks, but they didn't never knew the whole context. But then, yes, with advancements in AI and the techniques of how we build large language models, you're able to put more and more in context. And what the latest sort of generation of models are is now it can basically keep a whole file in memory now. So you can just ask it, as you mentioned, just build an app all in one go and it can write that for you, which was impossible a year ago. Yeah, we didn't have as much
Yeah, it's crazy.
like
Like, I would
bandwidth.
only put in snippets of code
Yeah,
and it really just ask it to edit it, right? Because
exactly.
even when, like, let's say I was using ChatGPT back then, like, even when ChatGPT would write me code, it wasn't very good. Like, it gave me ideas for how to fix my code, but it wasn't writing my entire analysis for me, right?
Because
Like, I
it didn't know
couldn't
the
just
rest of it only knew that one component, not the whole context of everything else. Yeah.
exactly, didn't really know, like, what I needed.
Yep.
I couldn't even g like, I didn't even know back then, like, how to prompt it. Whereas
Mhm.
now with vibe coding, there are whole documentation, templates for you to fill out, for you to give your agents all of the information that they need to literally build the entire code for you. So let's say we were doing our projects, our capstone projects back in school, right? Like, I could probably just give it my data set
Mhm.
and write out all of my documents, what I need. And could you imagine it just does your capstone project for you,
Yeah.
all of the analysis, all of the outputs that you need? Like, we created some interactive tools for the company that we were consulting with. Like, it could have just created an entire program and an entire application that I could just wrap up and give to this company, which we did really manually
Yeah.
back then.
Yeah, so as you alluded to, it's really changing right how we work because, yeah, 2 years ago we would have to build stuff in components because you didn't know the context. You'd have to puzzle it out, do a little bit at a time. But now you can build it almost all in one go. The models are so much better that they understand all the context. So, what is the long term solution? Like is what is happening, and I think I'll ask you, but my opinion is just this is the new norm, right? Like we've seen this adjustment in only a year, and my sort of philosophy is you better start learning this now because it's here to stay, right? Is the AI. Another book I always quote is Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick, the Wharton professor, but his quote in the book Co-Intelligence is this moment in time is the worst AI is ever going to be. Meaning, you expect that, you think about that. This right
Yeah,
now is the worst AI is going to be. It's only going to get better, right?
exactly. And it's already come so far,
So far, yeah,
right? And we were talking about this last week as well. Like, I think Mustafa Suleiman recently said in 12 to 18 months, all of most of our functions are going to be automated. So
yeah,
it's only going faster. It's only moving more forward. So we just need to be on top of it. And I think when I think about vibe coding, last year it was such a phenomenon, right?
mm,
Like, we're going from a previous state where code was written very manually by many developers. And now a year later, it's not really necessarily like a new concept or something that's changing the way that we work. It's becoming the norm, like you said. So is it really, like, oh, you're learning how to vibe code? Or is it just, okay, now this is the next way in which we're now using AI as a coworker?
yeah.
Right, to help supplement the work that we're doing.
Yeah. So it's work is changing, right? Like you mentioned, 18 months from now, it's going to change. But I think the difference that's happening is just such a rapid development, right? Like in 1 year that this has happened so fast. Whereas the last big technologies, and we've reiterated this multiple times, that like the shift from on premise to web, like the cloud, like there's still companies doing cloud migrations, like, and it's been going on for like 10 years. But
Yeah,
AI is just such a rapid development that we're in this transition period, and it's changing every day, every 6 months, and we're almost like you mentioned, I think we're at that almost at that inflection point where it's really going to start affecting every industry if you haven't already. Like, yes, it's come for software developers who are being, I see these stories on Reddit all the time, that you're being forced to learn and use AI to be more productive. And I think that's where the implication is at the moment. Again, we don't know the exact future, but everyone, because this is the new norm, the expectation is now max productivity. You're expected to be produce more, produce differently because you're going to be living and working with AI. And now this AI is able to do so much more that one senior developer can now do the work of like three juniors because the agents are doing that. And that's using, of course, developers, technology as an example. But then what you were saying, right? It's coming for other industries. So I love using you as examples because you are in a quote unquote traditional business, not a tech company. I'm also as well. I'm in a tech role, but in a role you're in a company, and I can talk about my other experience in higher education, but like higher education or like a nonprofit organization, they're not tech companies that are building software as a product, but you're still seeing AI, right? Or you see opportunity at least with AI for your job.
Yeah, and, like, when I think about the way that most businesses work, right, like, we work with SaaS companies to
Yeah.
try and bring to life ideas that
Mhm.
we have, or we want to bolster the work that we're doing, or we're trying to take it to the next level. We could just do that in house. Like, I can test so much more in-house
Yeah.
from, like, a product perspective, right? Like, let's say I want to test a new app for users. I can just test that myself using AI agents versus maybe now I don't need to put out like a call for oh, the word's not coming to me right now, but like a
Call
call
for
for
proposal. Yeah.
proposals.
Yeah.
Yeah,
RFP.
I
Yeah.
don't need to put out a call for like, do I like I can bypass a lot of like statement of works because I can say, okay, well, I've already tested this. I already know exactly what I need. And I probably actually don't need a whole company to help me, or I don't, maybe I don't need a whole consulting agency to help me. If I have a developer who can really test most of the code if I create like V1, V2, V3, and then when it comes to production, then we're taking things seriously. It does kind of change the way that we think of the work of the role of developers, the role of SaaS companies, of consulting companies, and then of just the like a general, let's say like product owner, product manager, or
Mhm.
someone who's just wanting to test ideas. Like I think the that whole interaction between all of these different roles completely changes in my
Yeah, and so it's
understanding.
interesting. So to jump off that point and to something that we were talking about, an article I read today came out a couple weeks ago from Paul Ford, who's a technologist. He's like an old school blogger in New York Times. So he frames what you just talked about in two ways. So you just mentioned, just to riff off what you were saying, you no longer need to hire like an outsourcing company. So roles are probably going to change for people like IT consulting, like companies I used to work for, where their business model was, we'll do your code for you faster because we have developers in lower cost of living countries like India that will do that are like 80% of an American developer, but we'll do it for 20% of the cost. It made sense.
Yeah.
But so that's like maybe a negative. But what I found interesting in Paul Ford's article was also based on what you said, is that the flip side positive is my question to you, would you have done that RFP to begin with? But because you can do it now, you're given the opportunity to experiment more, right? To test these ideas that maybe you didn't have, never had the budget. Like you don't have the budget. Most companies don't, to
I
explore every
definitely don't
idea.
have any budget to do
Yeah.
anything, right? Like, this really it's so tough because on one hand, it really is totally doing an upheaval of industries, right? Of
Yeah.
roles, of functionalities, and what we value in companies and
Mhm.
in vendors. But it's enabling so much because for me,
Exactly.
and especially the team that I'm on, is constantly deprioritized. So I'm
Yeah.
not the one that can demand resources or demand budget. And so here I am with the now capability to kind of grassroots test
Yeah.
products on my own and actually be able to make a case for investment because I'm able to actually show, like, hey, listen, I
Yeah.
already
You can build
tested
a
it
proof of
myself,
concept.
right, at a lower level. And now let's put in the safety measures that we need. Let's, actually make sure that we do this right. But I've created the entire case for you. So I think it's going to really it's so there's the positive, it's really gonna enable a lot of folks, but it's totally gonna disrupt the a lot of service industries,
Yes.
and a lot of even just the amount of developers that you need in a company. But I wanna taking kind of riffing off of this as well, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on when you think about the potential of vibe coding and yes, we're kind of saying we don't need as many developers, and so maybe you're not gonna be learning coding in the same way. It's gonna change the
Mm,
way we learn coding. What do you think of the opportunity with how AI teaches itself and learns for it to develop coding faster than humans can comprehend the changes in codes or the potential for, new discoveries to be made by AI? If we can't keep up with how AI codes and changes code,
mm.
I don't know how that's gonna also develop or how
Now,
that's gonna also impact, developers and how
so
we work with AI.
so I'll give you the perspective of someone who learned, okay, not a coder for a whole life, but always grew up around code and did a formal computer science degree. One interesting thing that we were forced to learn, which is the great part of a traditional education, so I'm still an advocate for a higher education, but we learned machine language. So machine language when you're coding in the very lower levels, and then you got compilers like C, C++, where you no longer like we had to take classes in this and it's annoying, but you literally had to manage the memory in your computer and you had to say, okay, allocate this many blocks of memory because I'm going to run code. But then as coding evolved, you abstract a layer on that. So then the next level of compiler, like the C++, were able to take these ones and zeros that you had to program before and turn it into semi-readable. And then we got the next level where we got languages like Java and Python, where it's
Yeah.
almost natural language. Like Python is very logical for someone who's never coded before because
Mhm.
you still have kind of like code blocks, but you don't have this variable assignments in quite the same way. It's not as you don't have dot modifiers and all this other crazy stuff of other languages. So to answer your question, where I see this going is a positive if AI learns to code better because the quote from what 2 years ago, English is the new programming language. I
Yeah.
see AI as the next layer of abstraction that you no longer just like first we had like machine code zeros and ones, then we had the base compilers where you're still managing memory, then you had another layer of abstraction of Python, and now you have AI coding, vibe coding, where
Yeah.
the fundamentals are there, but you're just abstracting another layer. So yes, you're losing maybe touch with quote unquote the art of programming. Like you don't have to write code, the art of writing code. I remember there's tons of books on that back in the day of like the art of beautiful code. But as we talked about, yes, you're on the flip side is you're enabling other people that aren't coders to use these tools and get the benefits of code with just like we talked about without having to get a formal computer science degree without having to spend hours and hours debugging, building, learning. So I think the abstraction and your question of what happens if it starts moving fast is a net positive because it'll allow us to be more efficient with the code, with the context windows we talked about. So AI will learn more faster. It'll be more efficient energy usage if it doesn't use as many tokens. And yeah, it just democratizes the benefit of coding, I feel.
Yeah. And if anything, I've maybe just created a great, what is it, concept for the next, best-selling sci-fi novel. What happens when we don't understand the code that AI is putting together
Yeah.
anymore? Or maybe AI will figure out a way to solve all of our problems around, you know,
But as you
the
mentioned,
issues
that
with
there's of course negatives, right? There's positives that putting these tools that are so easy to use now in negative hands. To link it back to the beginning of this episode, as we start wrapping things up on this discussion, the downside is we're democratizing this. We're talking about the benefits, but there's always, of course, going to be risk factors. What happens
Yep.
when bad actors also can create, as we learned about in the book, The Coming Wave, self-replicating viruses, not just computer viruses, but physical human viruses that learn how to get around antiviral software that can learn and iterate on these attacks on ransomware that'll put things in. So there still needs to be guardrails, right? I think we still need, and maybe it's not for us to figure out, but governments need to figure out a level of containment, as we learned about in the book, to figure out what is happening with these models. Yeah, I'm
Yeah, I
proud
think
to
that's the biggest
see.
piece is, like, what's happening because there's so much we don't understand about how the
Mhm.
models learn,
Yeah,
and where does the
black
limit
box.
exist
Yeah.
on the learning and the development, and where do we step in? And there are
Mhm.
companies that are wanting to, you know, be mindful about that, and there are companies that are like, "The limit doesn't exist, let's just let them keep going and going."
Yeah.
So, what do you think, listener?
Yeah. So based on this vibe coding, just yeah, to throw the question back to the listener, the viewer, have you tried it? And if you haven't, my question to you is why not? Right? I think that is you really need to.
Get
I'm
on it now.
as much as we use vibe coding, I've finally recently said, okay, I've heard about Claude Code. I need to try it. OpenAI has OpenAI Codex now. It's coming to Gemini. So no matter what frontier model you use, it's in your system. And I feel you really need to start playing around with it now. So the difference as we kind of wrap up, you have vibe coding and you have these Claude Code, but the next level is coming. It's just recently starting to launch, which is Cowork, which is where similar to how vibe code lets you create coding files in a contained environment, like it can only write files in this folder. Cowork, the idea and what it actually not the idea, but what it does, it allows you to directly edit files on your computer, like Excel files, PowerPoint files, Word documents, all the stuff that every single business runs on directly. So it gives access to the entire context of physical files that you would normally, as we talked at the beginning, be copy pasting sections of to the AI. But if the AI can just search your computer, find the file directly, it really does change what it means to live and work with AI, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything's changing. So
Yeah.
this is the space to be because we're going to be talking about it and we're hopefully going to be leading some good discussions on it. So let us know your thoughts on vibe coding. Have you tried to vibe code? If you haven't, Replit actually has like an hour and 35-minute free training that you can go to check it out. So try it, check it out, and let us know your thoughts on the future of work.
Yep. So thanks for watching this episode, and we'll see you back here on the next one.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.